Hey there, this is my first response using Screencast, so bear with me a bit. So the question was essentially, we were talking about how you could reshove 10-9 suited. I don't have the hand up, but we're talking about 25 big blinds versus a button opener who's opening roughly 35% of the deck. You brought up the point that we don't really want to just reshove pocket aces, so how do we construct a value range? And then I brought up some questions. Your answer was essentially to have the value range be ace queen suited, ace king off, jack jack plus, three bet bluff some suited aces, sort of the bottom of our reshove range that has blockers, and then shove the middle. That's not far off from how I look at the spot, but I believe that we should talk about a few other things to understand this spot correctly. First of all, I kind of disagree with your three bet calling range. And the reason why is that I believe that, firstly, your three bet calling range needs to be hands that can dominate our opponent's range, our four bet shoving range, which you already had that was very strong. But they, secondly, need to realize equity well out of position, which, in my opinion, takes ace king offsuit out of the picture. I think that our range should probably look something like, let's see, oops, I have poker sites up, so I need to exit them. So yeah, our range should look probably something like, this is a guess. I think that we can actually three bet call something like even as wide as something like this. Um, and the nines are kind of questionable. Who knows? So we'll make nines plus ace ten suited, king queen suited our three bet call range. It could actually be wider, but we'll talk about this later. We don't want to completely gut our reshove range. So the next question is, what are our three bet bluffs? And the first question that needs to be asked when it comes to constructing our three bet bluffs is, what kind of bluff to value ratio would you need so as not to be creating a profitable spot to shove basically any two cards? So again, we're talking about value to bluff ratio here. So what I to illustrate this point, talking about value to bluff ratio, I want to talk about four bet shoving a little bit. And I've brought up this spot where we don't have any cards yet. We don't, and we're just going to assume that we're holding something like bottom of our range, 8-9 suited, 6-7 suited, etc. And we're the hero. Now the first question here is, how much does this guy need to be folding for us to have a profitable four bet shove with the bottom of our range? So the way to figure that out is to, first of all, check out the equity of four bet shoving something like, I don't know, king six suited. Not great, about 30% equity. So this three bet calling range has about 70% equity. So then the next question that we have to answer is, how often does the three better need to fold for us to be able to profitably reshove or four bet shove king six suited? Now the way to get to that answer is by using a break even fold frequency calculator. This is how I look at this spot. So remember that we're inferring the ratios of three bet call to three bet fold here. So looking at this hand, there's 10 big blinds in the pot. We're going to just call it 10-19. We have to call, looks like, oh gosh, 360. and then we shove, if called, whatever this number is minus this number. So I think it's 22.36. And we have about 30% equity, or 29 we'll call it, just to be safe when called. This means we break even if the villain is folding 42% with king 6 suited. Now, if we have something like jack 10 suited, well, jack 10 suited is not doing that well. Maybe something like queen jack suited? Yeah. If we have like 32% equity or 33% equity, it goes up to the villain doesn't need to fold very often. So in general, with these kinds of stack size, what I recommend is having about 2 valued hands to 1 bluff. Now, of course, this changes if we think villains are just overfolding, not calling enough, etc. But it's good to know, in general, that your bluff to value ratio should probably be at most 60% value, 40% bluffs, if you don't want to be exploitable to a 4-bet jam. Most people don't bluff enough, so I'm definitely not recommending 4-bet bluff shoving a lot, unless you see somebody who you are for sure is folding more than 40% of the time after 3-betting with less than 30 big blinds. That's why we have that stat in the max value HUD. So the point that we've reached here through looking at this break-even fold frequency is that in general, when you are the 3-better, you want 2 values to 1 bluff or so. So how would we create that? You've already said that we want to have about 4% or 5% of hands in our value range. If we have ace king in there occasionally, it goes up quite fast. And let's just say we have 4% of hands in our value range, although to be honest, maybe we want more. And then you mentioned having king 10, queen jack offsuit, and then all of these. That's a whole lot more. That's about having half bluffs, half value. As you get shallower, you need to have a few less bluffs in these kinds of spots if you want to be GTO. When you're deeper, you can have a few more bluffs because our villains can't just 4-bet shove and force our bluffs to not realize any equity. So I think that it's not a bad idea to have maybe this, and then that's it. How you create your bluffing ranges is up to you. We definitely have that in the max value. We have correct ratios, or pretty close to correct ratios, in the 3-bet or fold guy. It's okay to err on the side of 3-bet bluffing a lot because people overfold. The next question that I have here, hopefully that was understandable to you, is so the answer to this question here is 2 values to 1 bluff. The next is, how does having the top of our range removed hurt our shoving range? So remember how we looked at this, and we saw that we're going to give the button 35% of hands, which is really tight for what it's worth. But it's always good in pre-flop spots to be on the tight side. It's all weird. All these little 1% are kind of goofy, but that's just HRC. All right, so if the button's raising 35%, we can reshove unexploitably with the following range. (21.4% of hands. Now the truth is we can actually reshove wider than that because this has the big blind overcalling 5s plus, ace-9 suited, and the original raiser raise calling us pretty darn wide. We'll tighten up this range a bit. But the next question that I have is essentially what happens to the bottom of our reshove range if we remove aces, kings, queens, jacks, tens. Now, pay attention to this original calling range and see what happens. So what ends up happening is that the button calls about 6% wider, and then the bottom of our reshove range actually loses all of its value. However, I've noticed so far that people don't, raise call king 10 offsuit for 25 bigs, jack 10 suited for 25 bigs. So because I don't think people make that adjustment, I still think that we can reshove the bottom of our we can reshove the bottom of the reshove range even with the top removed. But keep in mind that a very savvy opponent could widen their calling range knowing that you have the top removed. That's part of why I want to keep ace king offsuit in there. And occasionally maybe you should throw in some queens and jacks just to make sure that you're not too exploitable. I'm not too worried. People don't make this call. People don't call all in wide enough. But it maybe is worth noting that maybe you could, if you know somebody is just reshoving the top or the middle without the top in it, maybe you can widen your calling range a little bit. So the point is that if you remove the top from your reshove range, your opponent can actually structure their calling range to destroy the bottom of your reshove range, because these reshoves are not unexploitable. They're actually protected by the top parts of your reshove range. So the point of this video was not to necessarily give you a concrete answer. I think that what I'd recommend doing in game is something like what you talked about, but just not have too many 3-bet folds. Maybe the bottom of the offsuit, the offsuit portions like this queen jack, king 10, etc. I think the ace-x suited just like to reshove these suited broadways, etc. like to reshove. It is a little bit disconcerting to see that these 9x suiteds, etc. become losing reshoves if the villain changes their range. So mainly what I actually recommend that I think you can do is to just shove the bottom, raise call top, not bluff too often, but maybe bluff the stuff that you're not super comfortable reshoving, so the stuff on the outside of your reshove range, and make reshoves that could be exploited because people don't exploit them. However, it's good to know how this all works together when you do decide to split ranges into 3-bet call, 3-bet fold, and reshove. Hopefully that wasn't confusing. Let me know if you have any questions.